Democratic women continue to make history after a record number of female lawmakers were sworn into Congress earlier this month. Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts and Kirsten Gillibrand of New York both said that they will run for president in 2020, along with Hawaii Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard. At least two other female Democrats, Senators Amy Klobuchar and Senator Kamala Harris, are also expected to join the race. CBSNews.com has an article out entitled 2020 Presidential Campaign Brings Field of Women, and it takes a look at the challenges these women face in the road ahead. CBSN political reporter Caitlin Huey-Burns co-wrote that article alongside CBS News political reporter Grace Seegers, and Caitlin is here on set with us now. What's up?
Hey, good morning.
So, walk us through. It was interesting. We were talking, you remember, earlier with Congressman Will Hurd, and I asked him about the record number of women that ran during the midterms, mostly Democrats, and what that meant for sort of the future of the Republican Party. And now we've seen this surge in women candidates for the presidency. What's driving it?
Well, we have a whole field of women candidates. I mean, this could be a field in and of itself. And there is no women's lane, which kind of shows that women running for office this time around want this to be about them, their records, and their visions for the country, and not to being defined necessarily as women candidates. But we did see a reaction after Hillary Clinton's loss in 2016, a reaction to the Donald Trump presidency, kind of fueled in the grassroots. And then we saw in 2018, a record number of women sent to Congress. So it's not entirely surprising now that we'd have a lot of women running for president, but it's still making history already. This is going to be the biggest field of women that we've ever seen.
It's really remarkable, something that you point out in the article, which is, and you sort of mentioned it here, that women are sort of, in the past, had downplayed their gender. It was sort of seen as a badge of honor to be able to say that, you know, forget the fact that I'm a mother, that I'm a grandmother, or whatever it is, I'm just a person who can do the job as well as the male candidate running. And now it feels as if they're embracing their gender and making it part of their campaign.
Right, and in different ways. We saw Kirsten Gillibrand, who announced her exploratory committee this week, talk about being a mother and kind of how that formed her worldview as it comes to policy. But some of these other women running, Elizabeth Warren, for example, have not really played up the gender card at all, or the issues of gender, instead focusing on kind of what they've made their careers around. So for Elizabeth Warren, it's been on the economy, on being a protector of the middle class, kind of this anti-Wall Street theme, and she does talk a lot about how when she was a young mother herself, she needed help watching her kids, and kind of frames it in that lens. We also know Kamala Harris, who's preparing for a bid, hasn't really played up gender, but she was a former prosecutor, very much playing up her biography. So they're playing it up in different ways, or sometimes not at all, which, you know, experts say that this is an opportunity to showcase not only a deep bench of women talent, but also different kinds of paths for running as a woman in politics today.
What lessons can these candidates draw from the very brutal race between Hillary Clinton and President Trump? And let's face it, I recall the 2008 campampane, then Senate candidate Barack Obama, that comment, you're likable enough, Hillary. And then she had a moment, I can't remember if it was a couple of days or a couple of weeks later, when somebody asked her about it, and she let herself sort of, she said it's hard running, and she sounded a little emotional, and that clip went sort of viral, if you can call it viral, in 2008, where all of a sudden we saw a little crack of veneer, and we saw her, you know, we saw a little bit more of Hillary Clinton. What can they learn from those two races?
Well, a few different things. First, Hillary Clinton in 2016 did make history as the first woman nominated for president by a major party. So that in and of itself was history making. But she still faced a lot of hurdles. And this question of likability came up over and over again. And it's also come up in this race as well. So it also shows that these hurdles, while it's, you know, there's more infrastructure in place for women to run, and there's certainly the public has shown through voting, especially in this past election in the midterms, that there is an appetite for women in leadership positions, but there still are lots of challenges. The other thing to consider is that Hillary Clinton won nearly 3 million more votes than Donald Trump. So women experts and those that we've been talking to and those running for office have said that, look, she was able to show that she could win the popular vote. So carving out or forging a path forward that way. But it also points to the idea that, you know, we haven't had a woman president before. There's not someone that you can point to in terms of victory on a presidential level to model campaigns after. And my colleague Grace Seegers talked to one expert who said, look, you know, we don't compare Mitt Romney to John McCain, for example.
Right.
And women still face a very difficult road ahead as it relates to what's expected of them. But this time around, they're very much focused on issues and what they want to talk about.
Is it possible, and I'm sort of forming this question as we speak here, but is it possible to approach the 2020 campaign, given what we've seen in the midterm elections, given what we saw, for example, in Alabama, where African American women were instrumental in voting for Doug Jones to become the senator there? Is it possible for some of these candidates to focus on women? Because it feels like in the past, women, if you're a family, you vote, generally husbands and wives, just because birds of a feather, you usually have same interests, vote together. But is it possible to separate women as a distinct category to focus on the issues that matter to women in the hopes that women and some men will carry you along to the nomination and the presidency?
Well, what's interesting about this cycle is that because there are so many women running or preparing for runs, that there's not a women's lane. So they're operating in kind of different ways. You know, as you know, Warren's very focused on the economy. Kamala Harris is talking about other issues. Amy Klobuchar, who we've not talked about yet, is also kind of seriously considering a run. We've seen her on the Judiciary Committee. She's also a former prosecutor as well. Tulsi Gabbard, Kirsten Gillibrand, talking about it in different ways. But, you know, especially after 2018, we saw a lot of women from a variety of different backgrounds feel like it was an important moment to get involved in politics. And Democrats right now say that women are certainly fueling the base of the Democratic Party. And we've seen that in not only in polling, but in actual votes. But you bring up an interesting point, which is that there's a lot of diversity within this field of women. Tulsi Gabbard, as you mentioned, Kamala Harris is the second African-American woman to be in the Senate, the first East Asian American woman also to represent in the Senate. So there's a lot of diversity within that field, and it's crossing over in so many different ways.
Let's talk about the Women's March that is supposed to take place this weekend. It's the third one. This is the third one that that is happening in D.C. and across the country. And this time around, some senators, Klobuchar, Harris, Warren, they're not going to be attending the event. How problematic is that for them? Or maybe it's not, because they're looking at the Women's March and saying that there's some problems that exist there. Right,
exactly. I mean, it does put them in a little bit of a difficult position because they, you know, the Women's March in 2017 was seen as kind of the catalyst, really, to get women involved in politics. They've had a lot of serious organizational problems and, of course, the anti-Semitic criticisms that they've been facing and haven't really answered that well. So you're seeing prominent women in public office distance themselves from the national organization of the Women's March, but it's not precluding them from participating in other events across the country that are operating independently of the Women's March, but on the same day. So you're seeing Kirsten Gillibrand, who's in Iowa, on her way to Iowa as we speak, is going to be participating in a local organization. And, you know, women say that, look, while this created an important moment and there has to be accountability for sure, that there is also this grassroots energy that we've seen from women, by women, for women, not only in getting involved in politics, not only in running and winning for political office, but also in terms of giving political donations. We've seen a surge in grassroots donations among women in 2018. So a lot of different factors going into this, although this does raise a lot of questions about the structure. People don't necessarily think that it'll change what the movement is about.
Really fascinating stuff. Caitlin Huey-Burns, thank you very much. As I said, you can check out this piece that you wrote on CBSNews.com. The 2020 presidential campaign brings field of women really, really interesting perspective. Thanks, Caitlin.
Thank you.